So it's certainly an honor, but I want to start off with a little story that I think is relevant to this because today is the 45th anniversary of me meeting my wife. 45 years, so that's good. That's okay. Don't clap too long. That's one woman, I just want to tell you. It wasn't more than anything else. But I want to tell a funny story that I think is appropriate because I really feel, all those awards and papers and positions are silly. They're just pieces of paper. But relationships, I think, are really critical and important. And I would really be remiss to not mention the Swartz family, who not only have been great friends, collaborators, builders of the university, parts of our community, but their philanthropy has really allowed us, not just our research, but the research across Nebraska and Iowa to really go gangbusters in unbelievable rates. And a lot of what I'll present today would not be possible without Carol, Keith, and the Swartz family. So a little bit of a round of applause for their work and support. Carol, that's going to cost you $10. I just want to let you know. You're not getting that free. I don't think you're getting off for free. I mean, it's big. But I do want to tell you a funny story to lead in, because I want to do this as an open question and answer, because in all seriousness, we've all been touched by Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and dementia. I just for a round, if you raise your hand, of a significant friend, cousin, aunt, uncle, mother that have been touched by Alzheimer's or Parkinson's disease. Okay, so you get it. So literally everyone raised your hand. So this talk will be a serious one. The new technology and the new medicines have enabled us to about to start a new biotechnology company. This is our third, actually. It'll be housed here in Nebraska, that will build new medicines. And I hope within the next couple of years, we'll begin to answer some of the devastating problems, questions, and issues that we have to deal with this dreaded disease that is going to be more common. It's not going away. But I will tell you a story that's a little bit funny and a little bit truthful. But one of the things that we started with was that when Carol started medical school, there was like one or two women. Women were not doctors. Now there's more women doctors than there are. But in my class, when I was in the Bronx, I'm just wearing this hat, and you're looking at my shirt, you're going to say, what does the Bronx, Nebraska, and Harley Davidson have something in common? Right? If you get that, I'll give you $20. But I think what's going on. But I will send a story, since it is my anniversary, the 45th time that a year that I met my wife. So I was in a small medical school, very similar to the University of Nebraska Med Center. It's in Penn State. And all of a sudden, I'm in the Bronx, right? This is the hat. A place called Jacobi Hospital, 1,400 beds. It was people are living for treatment in the halls. There wasn't enough beds. So I went from a small place to a big medical center in New York City, and I was overwhelmed. This is before dementia came in. Maybe I was at that point in time, but the issue was I had no time for teaching. So I go to my chief of service, and I said, please do me a favor. Don't give me a student. Don't give me a student. I don't want a student. And he goes to me, starts laughing. He said, what if I tell you a little bit about this student? She's young. It's a woman, because we only had 4% of the class that were women, and smart, attractive, and you're unmarried. In those days, it was just, we were just one-sided and directed. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about, but we'll leave it alone. There was like men and women, but I won't go any further than that. So this woman who was introduced was supposed to be my new student. And I looked at her, she looked at me, and very smart, beautiful, I could tell right away. We were going to have a good month, when we're working together, understand? But I had a problem. I had a big problem. I'm short, thin, a little dumpy, and she was beautiful, blonde hair, blue eyes, the whole bit. And I said, there's no way I'm going to get a date with her. And in those days, it would be, even now, if you're the boss and you asked your student for a date and she says, no way, you have a compromised relationship for the rest of the time, so it would be a big problem. So I had to figure out a way around this so I can get a date. So I said, you may look at me that I'm a young doctor and, all this energetic, but that's not really who I am. I was a motorcyclist. I own a Harley Davidson, and I was in a club. I got in a little trouble when I was going because I used to have trouble with the law. I made all this up, by the way. None of it is true. So this is really a big problem. So I thought she would be impressed, and I said, I just got a new Harley, right? It's not in Nebraska. This was in the Bronx, the first one. And she said, wow, you're a doctor and you ride a Harley. This is pretty cool. And I said, yeah, we can go out on a date. It's Sunday, not a problem. And the problem was, but there was a problem. I lied completely. I never rode a motorcycle. I never had a motorcycle jack. I was just trying to get a date, you know what I mean, in Central Park. So it was a really big problem. So I went. She said, yes, she'll go out with me, but I had to buy a Harley in one day. Now you're laughing, it wasn't funny at the time. It's a terrible situation, so you can imagine. So I go down, this is something called Manhattan. I don't know if you ever heard of it. Not Manhattan, this is not Manhattan, Nebraska, or right? Kansas, whatever. This is New York, so it's the real Manhattan. So I got the motorcycle, I learned how to drive it, everything's going. And then I had to get what you call insurance. So I had the permit, I had everything going on. I think I knew how to ride it. The guy goes to me, he said, I'm not going to give you insurance. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, I want your mother to sign this form because you're a young doctor. If anything happens to you, I want your mother to agree to this. So I had to call my mother. She was arguing about it. She finally signed it, got on the date. Ultimately, we're married. 35 years goes by. It was 10 years ago. And we were down in Omaha, right? They have these things where they sell paintings and artistic. And there was a little statue of a little guy riding a motorcycle. She said, I got to get this for you. We've been together 35 years. And the problem was I had to tell her the truth. So you think she would be impressed, but if you ever go to my office, and you were there, as this is true, there's a big statue next to all my diplomas of a little guy on a motorcycle, because she said she doesn't want to see that in the office or in the house. So why am I telling you this silly story? Because trying to find an answer to Alzheimer's disease has been very difficult. I mean, we're dealing with a disease that is likely, without question, the most significant of this century, or the century that will certainly evolve. Everyone's been touched by it. The issue of Alzheimer's is not just an individual patient-doctor relationship. It's an issue of family. It's an issue of community. It's an issue of related disability. So it brings everyone in together. It's not a unilateral issue. And the way to go after this, and you're going to hear a lot more about it now, is there has to be passion. There has to be passion. What I just told you about my own relationship was passion as well. It was different. But the passion to ultimately conquer this disease is in front of all of us as scientists and as doctors, because we know that the numbers are going to get larger, the impact is going to increase, and the problems that we face on a social, individual, community, and family level are only going to increase. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a journey of a new medicine developed here in Nebraska, new biotechnology company that will move this medicine to clinical practice. And the idea that we can share the pride, not simply the pride of who we are, but the pride of place, that this research, this enthusiasm, this direction is here, right here in Nebraska. And at the end, you're going to hear, if you'll stay, a bit about what we're doing with cows. You're going to say, what are you doing with cows in finding dementia? But you're going to hear a lot about this. So this is the Elmwood Community Foundation. It's in search of cures. But we're going to start with something a little unique, and that's a prayer. And you're going to say, what this crazy guy from New York starts with a prayer. How many people were at church this morning? Okay. So I'm going to share with you a prayer that I do or say every morning. And why is this important? Because we have to understand that we're not here alone, that there is a God in heaven that's looking at us. And our job, I think, no matter what we do, whether doctors, lawyers, zookeepers, development, farmers, it doesn't make a difference what we do or who we are. But we understand that we're really in the mission to find God's work. And that's really our singular direction of who we are and what we hope to achieve is to believe that we're not here alone. So I'm going to share with you something personal. And I know in this group, you'll understand and you'll accept it. This is something that I don't do on a general basis, but something very, very important to me. And this is the prayer, which I think is a very important one, because it really tells everything that will come after in this talk today. So I hope to reach old age. That's me. And you may look at me that I'm already an old guy, but old age means older than old age, right? Okay. We just celebrated Carol's 90th birthday. I don't know if you know that. We should give her a round of applause and 90th. And Amy Volk, who's kind of the bastion of direction, and she said we should have a little cake, maybe a cupcake we'll bring over, we'll blow it out. But I think, how could you fit 90 candles on a cupcake? I think that would be very important. So we had, how many people were at Carol's party? Probably a whole bunch of people here. We had dancing, right? Even dancing on tables. I think a lot of people were going on no tables. But you were dancing pretty much, Carol. I don't think you were going on. But we really had a good time in celebration. But 90 is really 50. Maybe it's 40 that are going on. But old age is relative, is what I'm trying to say. So I hope to reach old age on this earth and live in the presence of God and the Lord each day. And I think what we always have to understand, that we have to be modest in everything that we do, except to know and desire the art of the profession of what we're trying to accomplish. So modesty is part of what we need to achieve. And that's why I was teasing about speaking another 15 minutes, Carol. I think that was enough. Let me not be deceived into thinking that I already know enough, because on the contrary, I need the strength and the joy and the ambition to know more every day. So that's what we are and what I believe we're doing in trying to find an answer. Art is endless, and the mind of man or woman can always grow. We can always develop and get stronger each day. So I hope you'll share that prayer with me, because it's really critical in what we're going to present today. Is everybody with me here? Did I put you guys to sleep already or not yet? Okay. So I'm going to start with, I hope I can get this through the internet. Do we have an internet here? Okay. So what I'm going to show you is a very interesting story. You're going to have to really keep quiet. I'm sorry. It's almost 30 years old, this videotape. But it's a really big one. And this is another story similar to what I told you before. But it was a woman who was 18 years old, 19 years old, right out of college, and was teaching. It was her first job as a substitute, not really a substitute teacher, a co-teacher in the Omaha school system, and was in the intensive care unit. So at that time, I was a very much active doctor. Almost right when I began my work here in Nebraska, and they said, come and see this patient. Okay, hopefully, don't worry, it's okay. We'll pick it up in a second, but we'll do the spin in a second of the videotape. We don't need this just for this one because I do have the course. Okay. Okay.
All good now.
Okay. Thanks. So, what we're going to present is what happened, and you're going to have to really be quiet because, again, it's almost 28 years ago today. But the big question is, can we reverse dementia? Can we make dementia go away? So this was a young woman, kind of 19, 20 years old, I guess, further along, who was in the intensive care unit, given a couple weeks to live with a profound dementia. And nobody had diagnosed this dementia. It was going on and on and on. And when I came, I won't mention the hospital, but it was in Omaha, and it wasn't ours. But the doctor said, stop. Let her be, let her die. Let her die peacefully. Don't get involved. And I said, well, I'm here, and I am involved, and if I can help, I will not let her die. I will not let her die. We'll do everything in our power to change this course of dementia. So I want to just tell you this, because we face this with Alzheimer's every day, but this is a woman whose dementia was cured, and the outline of what happened with her was a life, a real life. She had family, she had babies, they're all grown now, and she lived a very, very good life when she was given a couple weeks to live. And we're going to talk about how we can reverse the brain's impairments, that it is possible that when you see a sick brain cell, it doesn't mean the game is gone. We can induce regeneration, we can improve connection of brain cells and talking, we can improve cognitive function. There's a lot of things we can do now that we weren't able to do 30 or 40 years ago. And I want you to listen carefully to this story, because this is what our prayer is, that I just showed you, of what we hope to accomplish with Alzheimer's disease. I hope this is working.
Well, I wasn't quite sure when I was speaking or why I was speaking, but now I know after listening to all of you. Yes, Dr. Gendelman asked me to speak about my life and what I've been doing lately. And I wish I could tell you my life is very exciting, but in fact, it's very ordinary. I'm sure it's not unlike your life. Maybe your life is a little bit more exciting than mine. Some of my more ordinary experiences lately have been like laying with other people last week. I bought a Powerball ticket. However, I lost. I watched the Seinfeld series finale, whenever it was on, and like millions of other Americans, I was a little disappointed in it. While I was playing golf in the par 3 hole, I got the tee shot right on the green. However, it took me 10 putts to get it. So I had to take an 11. And as a teacher, I worked with my students and counting down the days until summer vacation. And by the way, there are 9 days left. So basically what I'm trying to tell you is that my life is pretty ordinary. But don't get me wrong, I appreciate my ordinary life. I'm grateful to have my ordinary life. However, what is not ordinary about my life is a little over a year ago, I was diagnosed with having the AIDS virus. And Dr. Gendelman is the one who diagnosed me. And when he diagnosed me, I was in the advanced stages. In fact, at one point, my viral load was off the charts at over 1 million. And he said that if my medicine would start kicking into things, I would probably be dead within 2 months. Unlike most AIDS patients, dementia was the only real symptom that I had. And dementia did some really crazy things to me. For example, I would walk into rooms and walk around my house and look for rooms that weren't there. I would wash dishes in the sink only to find out there were no dishes or water in the sink. I would take my students to lunch 2 hours early, and when it was actually time for lunchtime, I would be late. And I only remember these things because of what my family and friends have told me. For about 4 to 6 months of my life, I can remember very little. There's one thing that I would like to say about this whole experience. It took me 5 doctors before I could remember that. The first 4 doctors either diagnosed me with something that I did not have, or they did not diagnose me. In fact, one doctor said that my ordinary life was causing too much stress and wanted to come back in a month and we'll see what else we could do. They never asked me if I thought that I might have AIDS or would you like to be tested. And had I been given the opportunity, I would have said, well, no, I don't think I have AIDS, but go ahead and test me. That extraordinary time in my life happened about 14 months ago. A lot has happened since then, both on the medical end and in my personal ordinary life. Dr. Gendelman continues to monitor my progress and my condition, and I continue to maintain my ordinary life. I do not have a medical mind, and there's a lot going on there that I will never understand. I'm sure that I'm the only one who's going to cry this. I do know one thing, that if it wasn't for all of you who understand it, that I wouldn't be here today. And for that, I will be forever grateful that I'm able to live my extraordinary, ordinary life. Thank you, Dr. Gendelman.
So we're going to switch gears a little bit. I hope you're able to hear that. But 25 years ago, the notion that any dementia could be reversed was unheard of. You know, once the brain it loses its connections, the nerve cells are no longer firing. We don't see an end result or an end point. Coordination, movement, cognitive function, it's over. But that's not true. Now we live in the era of neuroprogenitor cells, the notion that brain cells can be replaced and that connectivity can evolve. So we're not where we were 20, 30 years ago. We're in 2024. And that's when I want to take you now into the laboratory and tell you what we're doing to actually not only replace but rejuvenate damaged nerve cells in the face of Alzheimer's disease. Now, I don't have to tell this group what Alzheimer's disease is. It's irreversible, it's progressive, involves memory and thinking skills, and it affects more than 5 million Americans that are living with this. This is something that's clearly on the rise and quite significant. The caretaker's provider, it's a $244 billion issue. In beyond 220, we're talking about up to 1.1 trillion. So this is not simply an issue of a healthcare problem. It's a healthcare, well, I wanted to use the word crisis, but I think that's the best word that can move forward with this. So what do we see in the brain? And this is really what we're trying to attack and change. What we're seeing is the buildup of plaques. And you have to know, and we didn't know this until very recently, when people looked at younger patients, that these plaques and tangles don't start when you're 70 or 80 years old and developing Alzheimer's disease. These plaques start when you're 30. So the issues of the histopathology, the plaque accumulation, occurs decades before we develop Alzheimer's, or those who are susceptible develop Alzheimer's disease. And only in a subsegment of people will these plaques convert to what? To the signs and symptoms of Alzheimer's, which is the cognitive, motor impairments, recognition that we all part of this disease complex. But these disease states begin years before, third decade of life. Now, why is this important? So, Dr. Gendelman, who cares? If they don't show any symptoms, and only a portion will develop the signs and symptoms of dementia, what do we care? Well, we better care, because we can do something about it. We believe we can do something about it early. So there's a whole issue and research in what we call preventative medicine. Preventative medicine is when we do something or intervene before the disease actually manifests. And that's a big portion of our research efforts in preventative medicine. These are the highlights: the tau protein, the amyloid, PS1. There's a whole number of tangles and plaques that form, and many of these we have in our brain years before the development or the non-development of Alzheimer's disease. So what have we learned in the recent years and what we call the good, the bad cells in Alzheimer's disease? Well, for a really long time, we thought that the inflammation that occurs in the course of Alzheimer's disease, so there is an inflammatory response in the brain as part of this disease complex, was just a reaction. The nerves are being killed, the connections are being dissembled, people are developing symptoms, and inflammation is just a reaction to the disease. It has nothing to do with anything but part of the end stage, or what we call the pathobiology or the pathogenesis of Alzheimer's disease itself. But we know now that's not true. That the inflammatory response that we see is the inciting event. So it's all part of this disease, not a reaction to it, but part of the initial process of nerve cell destruction or damage. So what is going on? What's going on is that the normal immune system, which we get a cut, we get a scrape, right? We fall. We have a number of different processes that we see or do. We can get a splinter. What happens? Well, the splinter occurs, or that fall, or that scrape incites an inflammatory response, right? If we have it peripherally outside the brain, it becomes red, it becomes swollen, that injury is painful, and then after a period of time, it's reversed. The inflammatory response goes away. There's what's called a healing reaction, and then under normal circumstances, whatever happened, that cut, scrape, or splinter goes away. And it's we never ever had that problem before. It becomes not recognizable. So we asked a very simple question: why does that happen? How could that be reversed? And can we use that mechanism to reverse the injury that's ongoing in Parkinson's and ALS and Alzheimer's? Could that same immune process be harnessed for a therapeutic gain? So in the course of our research, we realized that there's bad and good cells in Alzheimer's disease. So this is a rendition of what the good and the bad is as we look forward. But what we see are two different types of cells. This is a very complicated slide of what we call TREG and TEFs, and I'm not going to teach you basic immunology, but I will tell you a couple things. That in the immune system, there are inflammatory cells. These are called T cells. And the inflammatory cells are critically important, not because they make an injury red and they cause pain and they cause discomfort, but they're mobilizing a response that's absolutely essential for injury and injury clearance. What is that response? That response is when this process or these cells become inflamed and become red, they're able to engulf the debris, in this case the splinter or the injury or the bacteria or whatever has caused that, and they can engulf it and they can clear it, right? That's what the redness comes, because these are inflammatory cells that are active in clearing a pathogen or clearing a foreign body or clearing an injury. They're all part of the initial part of immunology or the immunopathogenesis of any process, including Alzheimer's. Then what happens? Well, these TEF cells, they're called T effector cells, come in. So you have phagocytic and effector cells. You have a whole variety of cells that go on. And these effector cells next come in, and they mobilize even a broader immune response where they allow for clearance of the injury. So you have the local immune response, and you have a secondary immune response which is called TEFs. Now the issue is, if you look at that, the TEFs are the inflammatory process. The TREGs on the right are the regulatory process. They clear things and make things back to normal. But what happens in Alzheimer's disease that everyone forgot? They thought it was insignificant. It's no role. What do they play? Are they relevant to injury? Absolutely relevant to injury. Because what happens with these inflammatory cells is during the process of these plaques and these tangles and all the pathogenic or pathological events that are found in Alzheimer's disease, these pathological events cause an imbalance between the inflammatory cells, which are TEFs, versus the regulatory cells, or the neuroprotective cells, which are called TREGs. Now, why is this important, and why was this overlooked for decades in Alzheimer's disease? Why did that happen? Because people thought, the scientists thought, the clinicians thought, the healthcare providers thought that this was just a reaction. Not a big deal. Just part of the disease. Don't worry about it. Not a problem. But these cells accumulated, and they accumulated, and they accumulated into large amounts. So we had to ask a fundamental question. What do you think we asked? If you're a scientist and you're in Nebraska and you're trying to find the key to Alzheimer's disease, what would you do? What would you do that may be missed? What would you do?
Can you balance it?
Yeah, well, you're close. What would you do? You would take these inflammatory cells and you would take a model, in this case, a model of low-level or pre-dementia, and you would infuse these cells into an animal that had very mild dementia or very limited dementia. And you would ask the question, if these cells are important and I'm infusing them into an animal that has a low level of dementia, what would you expect to see? Dementia. You would expect to see that the dementia gets better or worse? Worse. Absolutely. So what do we need? You want to join the lab? You got exactly right. That's exactly the right answer. Now, Carol didn't get that question right, but I'm just going to... She's a doctor, one of the earliest female doctors from the University of Nebraska, but I won't get into that. I would get her in trouble. She's not going to support us. Okay, I'm going to just go through this thing very quickly, and I'm going to come back to this. So what we had to do is we had to generate these bad cells. And they're called A-beta TEFs. Now, why would we generate A-beta? It's a lot of work. We had to do a lot of molecular biology and all this kind of stuff, and I'm not going to bother you with the details. But what we did to make sure we answered the question is we took these, what we thought were bad cells, right? And then we engineered these bad cells to react to the cause of Alzheimer's disease, which is the plaque, the amyloid beta, that protein. Why did we do this? Because we wanted to ask, if we infuse these cells back into an animal that has a low level of dementia, and they're specific for the cause of this disease, our prediction was they would make an animal develop Alzheimer's disease, the signs and symptoms of Alzheimer's disease in a mouse. Did you get that? Listen, there's going to be an exam after this. I'm going to tell you right now. And I'm going to tell you, if you don't score at least an 85, you're going to be with me all day, because we're going to go over this over and over and over again. It's going to be important. But that's what we did. It's a lot of molecular biology of how we did all this. But this is what we saw, which is really cool and interesting. I don't know if I have a pointer, but I'll go through this. What we saw, this is the animal that has what we call APP-PS1. That's a low level of Alzheimer's disease. How do we know? Because if you look in the area here in green and here in brown, these little brown dots are the singular part of Alzheimer's disease. These are the plaques. So what would you expect to see if we infuse these cells, these effector cells, these bad cells, back into this animal? what would you expect to see? Would these be getting worse or better? Worse. And that's exactly what happened. There's more of these plaques. You can see it here in green compared to the novel delivery system. But even more important and more critical is what you see here. And what is here? These are cells that govern inflammation in the brain in the face of Alzheimer's disease. So what we would expect to see if we're making this disease worse is these angry cells would grow, they would proliferate, they would get larger, they would get more significant in cell size and position, right? Compared to the control, which is the non-transgenic or the normal animal. And what you can see here very nicely is the difference between this and this. That the inflammatory response got a lot worse. More plaques, more tangles. We can quantitate this, and we accelerated Alzheimer's disease in a specific way. Now this didn't get that much excitement, I'll just be honest with you, because people are saying, Dr. Gendelman, all you're showing is something bad, that you're making Alzheimer's worse. So nobody wants that. We want to see something good. How many people want to see something good? Okay. How many people want to see something bad? Nobody raise your hand because you're going to fail your exam. Who wants to see good? I showed you the prayer. The prayer in the beginning was to ameliorate this disease, to make it better. But we had to show something bad first, to show that the idea, that the hypothesis is what we were studying was in fact correct. This balance that I showed you before, what would occur in the disease, that we're seeing more of these bad cells compared to the good cells, then that would be a problem. We wanted to change that, but we first had to show that the hypothesis was correct. Did you get that? Okay, you're going to be good. I mean, you're the teacher's pet. You're sitting right in front and you're in a problem. What's going on? How do you think I married my wife? I wasn't good looking, but I was a good teacher. Otherwise we would never be. I have 8 grandchildren now. You know that. We're still growing. We're still growing.
I need the test now because I'm forgetting something.
Well, it's no problem because Carol will be initially, she's the proctor, and she'll be giving the exam when it's all done and finished. But let me go over this, which I think is really important, if this will work for me. But this was what we dreamed to be possible. Now you look at me and you say, Dr. Gendelman, what are you doing? You have all blue dots all over the place. In a mouse, and adaptive transfer, the blue is all over, and then there's blue in the brain. What are you actually seeing? What does this mean? If you can understand this slide, you can understand all the research that we've done over many, many years. And I remember showing this to our chancellor, who's about to be our president of the university very soon, and he helped in a big way to secure additional funds and support to move this theory along. And I really owe a lot to him for sharing that vision early on in a big way. But let me show you what that vision was. So this is bad. This is bad, and this is good. Okay? You get it? So if it's a multiple choice question, and I asked you which is bad and which is good, you're going to get it right. Now, why is this bad? Because all this brown here are plaques and tangles. These are the bad proteins that accumulate. I told you, sometimes in the second, third decade of life, regular people who are walking around may actually have this, but no signs of disease. When the disease occurs, 3 things happen. First thing is the connecting processes of what's called a nerve cell becomes damaged. So the nerve cell doesn't behave or look or appear like a normal brain cell. It is already evidence of damage. The second thing that happens is these red cells, which are called inflammatory cells, and the reason they're red is because they're angry, They're producing inflammatory processes like that splinter, right, that we talked about, or the scrape, or the infection. They become red. Why do they become red? Because they're going to engulf the cause, pathogen, clear what's going on, and try to retain the normal homeostasis, the normal environment of the brain. But they have to clear the pathology, and that's why they turn red. The other part of this is related to an astrocyte, which is the supportive cells of the brain. They're not shown in this figure, but they in fact maintain, if there is no redness or inflammation, they maintain the homeostatic environment. They maintain a normal environment in the brain, but everything in this slide is totally out of whack. This is an APP-PS1, and a PS1 is an Alzheimer's mouse. So it has all the genetic elements of an Alzheimer's mouse. You with me? Mm-hmm. So it has the plaques, it has the tangles, it has the inflammation, it has everything, all the bad disease. Now you ask me, Dr. Gendelman, you're missing something. How can you do this in a mouse? How could you take a human disease, because mice don't develop dementia usually, although some in my house do, especially if we accumulate, because they're going to get caught with a mouse trap. But I'm not saying, but most mice don't develop dementia. So how do we make a human disease in a mouse? How do we make a human disease in a mouse?
Engineer the mouse.
What?
Engineer the mouse.
Yeah, well, the first thing is they have to have at least part of a human brain, and they have to be immunosuppressed so we can have a human immune system. They have to have all what we call the genetic elements of human Alzheimer's disease in a mouse. That's a lot of work. But we had to engineer the mouse. Luckily, there are things called stem cells. You can take a piece of skin and make it develop into a neuron or a glial cell. We have all this new technology that we can actually reproduce a human disease in a mouse. And I'm not going to go into that now because it will take a little bit of time. But I will tell you something about my neighbor, which will probably get me in a lot of trouble. But I have a neighbor that owns a funeral parlor. And he says, Dr. Gendelman, my whole job is putting people, their last times of life and whatever, and I won't mention his name, but if I do, you'll know who it is. It's a big name. And he says, I'm really fascinated by what you're doing because you're making a human disease in a mouse. Did you ever try to take a regular mouse and make it smarter? Engineer human. I said, yeah, of course we did that. How do you think I stayed married for 45 years? I got the mouse doing the dishes, doing the garbage, taking everything out, going out. And I take credit for all the good things that I've done. But we haven't done that yet. And that's not the research we're doing. Just so I stay out of trouble. We are not making mice or robotic mice doing the dishes. We haven't done that yet. But we have been able to engineer a pathological animal in a mouse to reflect human Alzheimer's disease. All right, we have been able to do that, and we study. So what we wanted to do is to change this into this. Now, what is this? This is normal nerve cells. You can see they're all green because they're behaving. Red is bad, obviously. Green is good. They're nerve cells. They're connecting normally. The microglia, the inflammatory cells, are now orange, right? They're not red and processed inflammatory. They've shrunken in size, and they're just performing normal function or clearance function in the brain. And then if you look at the plaques, you can see that most of the plaques have already been cleared. So how did we do that? How do we reverse Alzheimer's disease in a mouse? And what's the implications of taking that reversal and bringing it to humans? You with me? Okay, how do you think I did that? How do you think I did that? Well, my real name is not Howard, it's Houdini. And I just want to tell you, we're working on this. That's another round, but it has nothing to do with being Houdini. But let me tell you how we did that, which is really cool. And we have done that. That paper generated a lot of interest. You're going to help me with the internet because I want to show that press that was a little bit, not right this second, but in a minute. But thank you for paying attention. He's thinking, what do I need to listen to this? I'm just 20 years old. This is not a disease that I need to be bothered with. Right?
Yeah, right.
Am I right or am I wrong?
You're not wrong. No.
But he knows a lot about computers, so that's a good thing. He's going to make a living. So what we did in terms of making this happen, we went from this to this. We went from this to this. So these blue cells, these are cells that are run out. That means we've taken this regulatory cell, that cell other than the bad cell, we've taken the good cell, and we've injected it with the idea that if we inject enough of these good cells, we may be able to reverse the disease, right? That's what we thought in our little pea brain, that could happen. But what we saw, yeah, there was some effect of just injecting these cells back into this animal, but the disease didn't go away. The disease didn't go away. So we were missing something that was very, very important. And what we were missing? What were we missing? We were missing is we had to train these cells to get into the brain, into the areas where Alzheimer's disease occurs. How do you think we did that? How do you think we were able to do that? We did this by going to milking cows. Absolutely. We're going to talk about that in a moment, but that helped. Milking cows is something I did not learn in New York City. I just want to tell you. There were no cows. Well, you're laughing, but you think you got to look. And the way New York is right now, I should take that back because I'm not sure where we are right now as a society, but I'll leave that alone for the time being in terms of New York, and I won't make any jokes. Because my kids still live there, but that's another issue. You know, how could you be, well, I don't want to go into it, but you know, they went, politically, it's been very hard for me because I'm like a red, you know, inflammatory cell, but I'm not sure red is inflammatory in Nebraska. It may be the way to go. But my kids, they went off the bad way. They went off the bad way. But they're good kids. I mean, the environment is a big problem. Well, we'll talk about that in a moment. It has nothing to do with Alzheimer's disease. But what we had to do is to actually train these cells to enter the brain, and specifically, once they got into the brain, to change the environment of the brain so we can do three things. One is to eliminate these plaques that were instigating Alzheimer's disease, rid the brain of the inflammatory responses as a red to orange, and change that ongoing inflammation, and maintain homeostasis, where these nerve cells were communicating with each other. So what I'd like to do, I hope this internet is working, and we can go back to this, and to show you, I hope this will work. Can we make that happen? So this was in Nebraska. You may have seen it, but when we achieved this, it became a big reason. It made national and local news. And I'm going to show you what I just tried to explain, but really have it done by a Nebraska media if we can get that working.
News live at 10. Nebraska Medicine and UNMC are taking major steps towards reversing the effects and severity of Alzheimer's.
A goal researchers and scientists have been pursuing for decades. Tonight, our Marta Lundak has more from the man and the team who say they're one step closer to a potential cure.
So why Alzheimer's disease? Because Alzheimer's disease is not simply a disease that affects a single person. It affects a family, and it affects a community.
Dr. Howard Gendelman has dedicated more than 2 decades to neurodegenerative research, namely Alzheimer's. The research started with a simple thought. When you scrape your elbow, your immune system responds. There's redness, swelling, and some pain, but then your body starts to make repairs to the affected area.
Why can't we take
this simple repair mechanism that is operative on a day-to-day basis in millions and trillions of people, and look at ways in we can harness that to repair the brain in the face of neurodegenerative disease.
So that's what Gendelman and his team started working towards. But there were two major obstacles. The first, identifying the cells that are involved in repairing injuries, like that scraped elbow. After identifying the cells, the next obstacle was figuring out how to get them to respond specifically to the brain. The answer? Genetic engineering. Simply put, they're training the cells to learn a new function, like teaching a dog a new trick.
We were able to change the repertoire of these immunological cells to gain entry into the brain, to react to the cause of this disease, and to repair the damage that has occurred, very similar to what we would see in a cut or a scrape or a splinter.
The cellular therapy was tested on mice with the disease, and Gendelman's team reported that those mice saw improvements in learning and memory, marking a major advancement when it comes to combating Alzheimer's. The next step will be testing in humans. Gendelman and his team are confident that this development will one day save lives.
Our biggest reflection of why we do what we do is to say that we've made a difference. We made this world better than it was before we were here and before we were involved.
Gendelman and his team say there are lots of approvals and regulations to be met before they can start testing this new cellular therapy in humans. He says they're working as quickly as possible to make it happen, and they hope to begin that human testing in 2 to 3 years. On your side in the newsroom, Marlo Lundak, 6 News.
I'll try to finish up, but I wanted you to really see and get inside the laboratory of why we're doing what we're doing. So I may not be able to finish, but we'll have at least some time for question and answers. So what we're doing for our human testing is this amyloid beta TREG. So what we're doing now, and I'm going to end with this because it's conceptually, I think I've covered what I needed to cover. But the next big step is, what are we going to do to humans? How could we move this to humans? So we're going to try to create a CAR T. Now, you may have heard of CAR T. How many people have heard of CAR T? You know CAR T? What have you heard of CAR T? Yeah, that's right. That's exactly right. It's used for cancer treatment. And why is it used for cancer treatment? Because you now have an immune cell. It's the exact opposite of what we're doing, by the way. Exactly the opposite. What you're doing is taking these effector cells that I told you about, these harmful killer cells, and you're attaching the protein that recognizes the cancer cell. So now we're taking the bad cells, infusing them in, and the bad cells end up killing, seeking, and then destroying these cancer cells. And I will say CAR T therapy in oncology is the hottest immunotherapy that's now around. It's right at the forefront of cancer therapy. And nobody has thought of CAR T for treatment of Alzheimer's or Parkinson's disease. It was ridiculous. Why was it ridiculous? Because the last thing you want to do is infuse into a patient cells that will kill other nerve cells, because then you'll not have to worry. The patient will die. That'll be the end of it. So what we had to do is to look at CAR T therapy and turn it around 180 degrees, is to re-engineer CAR T therapy for a neuroprotective or a neuroregenerative outcome. Totally turn this around on its heels. And I'll go into how we have done this. And we have. These are the therapies that have been around for a while. These are CAR T therapies mainly used for cancer, and it's super effective. We've had cancer cures and very significant cancer cures as a result of the CAR T. But we couldn't do that. Okay. See if I can turn this around really quickly. Okay. So what we had to do is to re-engineer CAR-T and turn it into something very different. So the first thing that we had to deal with is actually isolate the cells that were clearing the plaques in these mice that were able to reach the brain and were able to basically or simply change the environment of the brain, of the nerve cells and the nerve cell communications. So this was a big task. It wasn't simply finding the cell, growing the cell, putting signals on the cell, passing the blood-brain barrier, getting them into areas of injury. It was a lot of work to do all that. But we had to do it in a way that was safe, that would not cause any issues with the mouse, and certainly not cause any issues with humans that would be treated with this new therapy. So we did this, and I'm not going to go through all the experiments, but I will tell you the first question after we made these cells was proving that they entered areas of the brain that were damaged in the face of Alzheimer's disease. If they didn't go to where they needed to go, it wouldn't work. You with me? It wouldn't work. So we used what we call F18 FDA radio label. These are PET scanning, the next generation of PET imaging, that we can label these cells and know where the pathology was in Alzheimer's disease and use a blue tag, which was what we did, and show that not only they entered the brain, but they entered the brain in areas of disease. So we're able to do that. We're able to show that. And functionally, we're able to repeat that. The other part that we had to show, which is also very important, is we have to show that the metabolism of the brain was restored. And we're looking at sugar metabolism. Everybody knows what glucose is. We're looking at functional connectivity of cells. And we're looking at how the brain would actually be functional in the face of these therapies and their normal, what we were claiming to have achieved, which is normal homeostatic, which is a balanced environment in the brain. And what you see in pink or red in the middle, that's the TCR-A beta TREG, it would have to turn pink. That would mean that the brain metabolism was restored. And then the pink area would have to be in the areas of cognitive dysfunction, where the person wasn't thinking properly. Had to be in the right place, at the right time, at the right level. And we could do that because we had these PET imaging scans where we can follow these animals while they're still alive and to look at the changes in metabolism over time. And in blue is obviously the area that was affected where the TCR-A beta TREG, and you can see that we were able, in the animals that had the normal cell function, is to restore that function. And that's this. Okay, everybody can see that? That the pink is the pink. But the bottom line in all of this had to be the reduction of the plaques and tangles. So when we look at the disease, you see all the plaques and the tangles in brown or in green. There had to be changes as we entered these cells into areas of injury. There had to be significant reductions in the pathology or the cardinal pathology of Alzheimer's disease. There had to be improvements. So everybody can see the difference between this and the difference between this and this. We didn't completely make it go away in toto, but we were able to reduce the pathology in a significant manner compared to the diseased animal. But the most important part of this, and this is the kind of the end result of this, is changing this. This is the inflammation that's causing Alzheimer's disease. These big orange or red-like cells, they had to be replaced with a normal brain inflammatory environment. So we not only rescued the cells, got rid of the plaques, improved cognitive function in these animals, but also obliterated the inflammatory response that was driving Alzheimer's disease in these animals. But the bottom line is this. It's the proof of the pudding, and I can't go into this in general, but these are recall tests that we do for these mice. These are measures of cognitive function. So we were able, while we changed the inflammatory environment, whether we rescued the neurons, whether we got them into areas of injury, while we restored normal homeostasis and reduced the plaque formation, we also had to show that these animals were cognitively improved. And we did. They're almost exactly what they were in the non-damaged littermates. Okay. So where are we at now? And I'm going to end with this slide, and we'll take a few-minute break, and then what I want to do afterwards is tell you why we're so interested in cows. Why are we so interested in cows? That will be a 10-minute talk. What do you think? You're laughing.
20, 25.
No, I just want to tell you about cows. I don't know anything about cows. Everything that I know about cows, I was taught by these lovely individuals. I'm telling you the truth. We just came over and broke into their house, stole a couple cows, milked the cows when they weren't looking, and then ran away with the milk. But that's not true. Somewhere in between. But I will tell you that right now, this research is moving forward. The support that we've gotten, both locally and through federal grants, has enabled us to begin the time or the destination ultimately to human clinical trials, where we're going to take these cells that are re-engineered and then put them back into patients with Alzheimer's disease. And we hope to see a real amelioration, a real improvement in cognitive function. We're working on this. We're not the only ones in the world that are doing this. People are doing this for autoimmune disease, but we are the first in the world here in Nebraska to be able to use this technology as a means to treat and ultimately reverse Alzheimer's disease. This is, kind of a backwards story, and we're right in the middle of the story. So there's a beginning, but there's no end because it's still playing out. So I'm going to tell you a little bit of why we were interested in coming to Elmwood to begin with. When we had a program, plenty of research support, laboratory, we weren't hurting for anything. So why would we stop everything that we were doing in a very, making significant progress in cells and cellular therapy, money's coming in from different sources, support from the university leadership. Why would I stop all that we were doing and come to Elmwood, Nebraska and say we got to take another look at what we're doing? Why do we do that? Keith,
Why?
Multiple choice question.
Why did we come here?
Yeah, why do you come here?
You called and said you needed some milk.
Yeah.
Can I have you just move to the front?
Oh, I'm
I'll
sorry.
give you a chair in the front.
No, I don't need a chair.
Okay.
I'm not as bad as I look. I can still walk.
I got a call that Howie said he needed some milk, and I do whatever Howie wants, and I called John Oliver King, and I'm sure he thought I was crazy.
Yeah, so.
I've had stranger requests.
Yeah, so why would, now I'm not trying to be funny. I don't know your name, could I?
Well, Gary.
Gary? Okay, I'm going to ask you this. This is a multiple choice question, so I'm going to try to help you with this. So why do you think, so I think you know my background. we're actually been scientists at the university for a long time. We have one of the top research laboratories beyond here in the state and beyond. And what we're doing, we have companies and patents and all that stuff. Why would I tell my group, all my staff, we have to stop our work and come to Elmwood, Nebraska? Why would I say that?
Looking for a certain protein or something.
Okay, that's a good answer, but I didn't give you the multiple choice. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to make this interesting. Just to think that I'm a fair guy, I'm going to pay $20. Well, I can pay more, but I'm going to start with $20. If somebody gets the right answer, I'm going to pay, right? So don't worry about the ice cream. It's on me. Dr. Gendelman's going to take care of all this. Why would I do that? I had a product, had a research program that's working, patents, new company. Why was I so interested in? Yeah, well, that's right, but that's not going to make you $20. That's not going to be what's going on. It's a good answer, but it's not worth $20. So what do you think? Come on. Why would be interested in milk? I say the milk.
What's the most
You need
nutritious?
something to get the medicine to the brain.
Yeah, but what would be interested? I gave you the answer, so.
Colostrum is protein.
Colostrum. Why would we be interested in colostrum?
Protein rich. It's the most nutritious thing that you can give.
Okay, I just want to tell you something, and I don't know you. I mean,
She's
Our daughter.
oh, okay. So that, are you related to this guy over here?
Yes, I am.
Oh God. Okay, I gotta watch what I say then. I gotta be really careful on what's going on. Okay. Okay. So I had a hunch. This is why, some scientists, I think at my stage, because I can do crazy experiments, right? Mainly because I've been around a long time. I have had a lot of funding, a fair amount of success. I don't really need to prove anything to anybody. But why would I come to Elmwood, Nebraska? What was the question that I was really struggling with as an Alzheimer's researcher? What was I struggling with? I didn't have an answer.
I have no idea.
Okay, that's right. How to get it to the brain was one. What's
Colostrum has numerous neuroprotective factors and healing properties.
Oh God, I lost $20. God. No, it really hurts me. But I want you to tell. I mean, I wasn't expecting to lose money, and I just don't tell my wife.
Okay.
Yeah, but make sure you give it. Make sure she gives you that money for the milk. I just want to say, and for the ice cream. I think what's going on.
No fair. She's a nurse.
Are you a nurse?
Related too.
Are you a nurse?
I'm his niece, and I do work at the medical center, so.
No, I just want to know, are you a nurse? Yes.
No, I'm a speech-language pathologist.
Okay, all right. You can keep the money.
Yeah.
You keep the money. Okay. What are you looking at me? You think I'm trying? I mean, I'm just going to leave that alone because you're looking at me. I'm trying to do something here. But that's right. I was always interested in this issue of breast milk. And I mean, breast milk and breastfeeding has gotten through a lot of discussion, debate. What is in it? Is it important? Do you have to do it? And this has been going on for a long time, way before I'm alive, in terms of discussion of whether there is significant nutritive properties in breast milk that could make a difference as a potential treatment of human disease, especially neurodegenerative disease. And we were interested in breast milk because people drink milk, right? The allergies or allergenic properties are quite limited. The quantity of what we can recover is not limited. And there are properties that are known to be produced by breast milk that may be, in fact, or may have properties of not only delivery, but nutritive properties of protection, of nerve cell protection, cellular protection, or what we call cellular homeostasis. So this was our theory going into this, I think. is the issue of exosomes. Now, this is a very new field within really a couple years, that milk contains large amounts of this product called exosomes. And these are extracellular vesicles. They're generated by all cells, right? But they carry nucleic acid, proteins, lipids, and metabolites. But the source of where they come from is different. The composition is different. So when we talk about nucleic acid, proteins, milk exosomes are different from any other source of exosomes. And we thought that maybe if there was a nutritive component or a healing component out of breast milk, we would see it through the isolation of these cells, or what we call the extracellular products that were being made. Now, you may say, well, that's good and maybe makes sense, but how do you know if breast milk is nutritive? How do you know it is nutritive? How do you know you can isolate these organelles or these cellular or subcellular products that will come out? And how do you know it's safe and effective for what you're trying to do in an Alzheimer's model, or you can package it as a delivery vehicle? There's a lot of questions around that, but we had to know, the first question we had to know is, can we isolate exosomes from breast milk? In this case, from colostrum. Can we do that? Number two is we had to ask, can we test its biological properties? And number three, if they do have or the substance does have biological properties, is the biological efficacy coming from exosomes or maybe something else? Is it coming specifically from this particular product? Because breast milk is not just exosomes. There's many other proteins and nucleic acids and metabolites. It's not just one thing. There's many things that govern this. So we had to do that. There was a lot of work, right, to figure that out. And it was kind of an interesting but an unknown project that we wanted to move forward with. Is that right? So Deepta was kind of in with this. He did all the work, and I just want to make sure that he understands that even though you did get some ice cream, I'm getting all the credit. I'm getting all the credit for all the work that you did, so we'll just stop there. That's one good thing about being boss, right? You get credit for everything, and the stuff that goes bad, you can blame somebody else about. This would be a problem. Okay, so these are media's long-distance intercommunication. They affect cell biology. They can be used for therapeutic delivery. So we were also thinking, if this works, we can use it as a deliverable, that we can use the exosomes to deliver our cellular therapy and do it more effectively because it's non-allergenic. So we have a lot of potential mechanisms if this thing would work or not. So let me take you through this a bit, because we're still in the early innings of this game. But I want to go through a little bit of how they're produced. So the first thing that we found, which was really quite exciting, is that when we got the milk back of the colostrum, we felt we got incredible recovery. I think it was, 10 to the 14th exosomes or more? Right, I mean, huge. So we knew right away that the colostrum that we recovered here in Elmwood, Nebraska, was a bastion or a warehouse of these exosomes. So we were very, very excited about that. And this is really how they're made, which we won't get into today. But we had to determine whether we can look at the isolation at what point in time and during the time that we put the pieces together and be able to get these products, so to speak, these subcellular products in relative homogeneity. That means it can't be all over the place. There had to be a single peak. The peak had to be high. It had to be easily collected and understood. And you can see the size had to be consistent. The amount of RNA and protein or metabolites had to be consistent. And what we were seeing really had to show major differences between what we were believing that we can get out just of milk. We go to Hy-Vee and buy a quart of milk. What do we need to do all this and make a change? Would there be really a major difference in protein content? You can see 5 versus 16, nucleic acid 25 versus 42, and the size, which had to be relatively small and consistent. But the main thing is the recovery in the early go-rounds was significantly better than anything we saw with pasteurized milk. So we were recovering orders of magnitude more of these biological products. They were consistent. They had the right size, the right shape, the right charge. But that didn't mean anything. Why didn't it mean anything? What was lacking from this analysis? Size, shape, charge, recovery, Leslie, what was lacking?
Application.
That's right. That's exactly right. We didn't know what it did. I mean, if it didn't do anything, it could have all the metabolites, all the nucleic acids, all the protein, all the lipids. We can recovering high levels of this, but we had to ask, what does it do? Does it do something that would help us in understanding disease? I just spent an hour and a half telling you that there's a big inflammatory component in Alzheimer's disease, both at the phagocyte level, which we call the early immunity, to the later T cell immunity. So we had to ask, is there anti-inflammatory products that are being made or genes that are being upregulated or affected that may affect the course of the disease that we're interested in, which is Alzheimer's disease, right? So we had to know what the biological properties were. The other part that we're interested in is protecting nerve cells, protecting neurons. If there is any evidence that we can protect parts of the brain with these exosomes that we're getting from colostrum, wasn't too much of value to us, and whether they would control the immune response that would be parallel to what we were seeing in the course of Alzheimer's disease, would it have any effect? So we had to look at the disease, we had to look at the protection, and we had to look at inflammation. And that was the big question, because otherwise it took us a lot of work just to isolate and characterize what we got from these colostrum or colostrum milk, but we had to make sure that there was biological properties that were relevant to what we wanted to study. Otherwise, it would be of less value. So how do you think we did that? How do you think we did that? How do you think we determined that we were on the right track or the wrong track? Maybe it's not fair. Where's the nurse here? I paid you $20, so you got to do something for that money I gave you. You can't just be sitting next to a handsome guy. Is that your boyfriend there?
My fiance, yeah.
Your fiance?
Yeah.
Okay.
As of a month ago.
So look, I want to tell you something. Well, first of all, congratulations. Let's hear a round of applause. Round of applause. Okay, so that's good that you're getting married. Now she can afford the wedding. Yeah. I just helped her out. You're going to have the wedding here?
Yeah, in the area.
But in this room, right?
No, maybe.
Okay, because besides, I want to just tell you something. And this is a big secret. Besides, and maybe it's not a big secret, but besides being a scientist, I do have another job. I don't know, do you know this? I do play, I'm a musician, and I do play weddings. I do play weddings. You can save some money. Can I borrow that piano for 1 second? You're going to have to sit up. I'll tell you what I can do. And this is serious, if I can borrow the piano. So I'm going to save you. While I ride my Harley, I do play accordion, but I just want to say if you do need a band, I can do weddings too. So I can do that too, just in case you need a wedding. So that will save you some money. And I want to get that $20 back. I just say right now.
We did that with the accordion.
I did it with my accordion. Yeah, that's really a problem. You're going to embarrass me, but we're throwing everywhere. Okay, so don't worry about the band for your wedding. It's not a problem. But to tell me, see, this is what I mean. I love when people pay attention to my talk. I mean, it really makes me really happy what's going on. What we're trying to say is how we're going to test the biological properties of these exosomes that we isolated from colostrum. And we appreciate the work that you've done. The Ogerling, you saved our butt, so to speak, but you helped and supported this research. And I guess this is my chance to embarrass you publicly. That's what I'm going to do. What's going on? So tell me, how are we going to do this? How are we going to do this?
Well, you have to problem mice.
We don't have mice. That has nothing to do with mice.
Okay.
Nothing to do with mice. That's a big...
Yeah, is this like a call a friend sort of situation?
You guys are really bad news. Okay. So the first thing we had to do is after we actually procured the milk, brought them back to the laboratory, we had to isolate the exosomes, and we did that by serial ultracentrifugation. I mean, it's a lot of work went into this, and you'll have to believe me because I showed you these beautiful diagrams that we were able to isolate them in somewhat homogeneity. We did what's called PET scanning, and these were actually done in a mouse. And we're one of the few laboratories that has, you know what an MRI is?
Yeah.
We have an MRI just for mice.
Really?
Yeah, it's really cool.
Wow.
Yeah. What? What's the matter? It's a small MRI. Not a big one. But I want to tell you something. We didn't save any money. They still kill us. It still cost a lot. But we do have our own MRI to do this work.
So you had to figure out how to connect the exome to that trait.
Well, we wanted to know if we're going to use this, before we got into any biological characterization, we had to determine the distribution of these exosomes. Because if they didn't reach where we wanted them to go, which is the brain, we couldn't use them as a delivery vehicle, right? So that's a big problem. So we used, this is where the data was very exciting, because if you de novo just give any material, any lipid material, it's not going to go to the brain. It's going to go to the liver, it's going to go to the spleen.
So
It could go to
across the blood-brain barrier?
Yeah, we had to make sure that when we took the colostrum and we isolated these biological products from the colostrum, we had to be sure that it did reach the brain. And not only reach the brain, but reach the brain in an area where there was active disease. So that was very important. So we were able to label these exosomes that we got from the colostrum, purified them, and then use PET and MRI imaging. Why do we need MRI if we had PET?
Oh gosh.
Who is in the healthcare arena here other than Carol?
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 Metabolic.
Okay, Amy, what do you think? No, she wasn't paying attention. She's just thinking about what she's doing her next vacation with Tony. She's not thinking about this talk.
Well, one just showed you more soft tissue, right? The other one shows where the uptake is at.
Yeah, well, it was an anatomical issue, though. If we're going to be able to use and really record the brain or brain subregion, we had to know against not only the imaging or what we're seeing, but an anatomical localization. We had to put those pieces together. So we were able to, interesting because of the lipid content, the brain is loaded with lipid, obviously, and the exosomes are as well. We were able to demonstrate very nicely that there was a huge level of penetration of this colostrum to the areas of interest. You with me?
Howie?
Yeah.
What makes
Wait a second. Can I talk for a few more minutes? Or?
What makes it difficult to get through the blood-brain barrier?
That will take a long time. Standing on one leg? I don't know if I can do that, but I think the difficulty is structure. So there's a structural issue.
The cells are packed too tightly together.
Yeah. You have to open them up. You have to open up the adhesions of the cells. And that usually... Yeah, yeah, you can open it up a bit, but the adhesions of these cells are very tight. I mean, they're a tight level of cell-to-cell interactions, and you have to do that usually immunologically or functionally. And but this case, because of the lipid content, we were able to do it functionally, just based on the lipid alone. And the levels are pretty high, significant. I mean, compared to the gut, spleen is a very noticeable difference in terms of penetrance. So we had one, this was, it took us a couple months to figure out, but it was successful. So the next big issue is to show this by not one technology, we had to use multiple technologies. Why did we have to use that? Because it wasn't just a PET. We had to use IVUS, which is a radio tracer. In this case, a fluorescent tracer that we can actually quantitate regions, subregions of the brain, and be able to mirror that to where this disease, the Alzheimer's disease, was happening. So yes, we saw it in the brain, but now we had to show that the subregions were also penetrant, and we did this by yet another marker, another scan. Do I got that right? Yeah. Okay, but the big question, and the reason I'm talking about this today, was the EV function. Because if they didn't do the things that we're interested in doing, and they weren't reflective of Alzheimer's disease, we're wasting our time. They had to do something biologically and relevant that could combat the progression of Alzheimer's disease. And that's what we were mostly interested in. Okay, everybody follow that? It's okay to isolate them, show that we can do it, homogeneity, look at the curves, the physical chemical properties are all great, but we had to show that there was real biological properties. And this is how we did it. These are colostrum of 5 days milk. We isolated them by ultracentrifugation. Then we treated immune cells. These are the same type of immune cells that are present in the brain. And then do the isolation and sequencing on an Illumina platform to get to serious molecular biology. So what's the next thing we have to ask? What's next? Before we get into biological function, what do we have to ask next? Well, you're making a root beer float, right? If you're making a root beer float, what's the first thing you have to do when you're making a root beer float?
Have the ingredients.
Get the ingredients.
Yeah, you have to have the ice cream. And do you got root beer? Oh, good, because I didn't. I mean, I think you got the root beer. I'm not really questioning the integrity of that root beer float. But you need to have the ingredients, right? You need to have the portions. And this root beer float had to be better. If we're going to have the root beer float as a snack, I guess, what has to happen? They have to taste better than...
You have the right proportions.
Yeah, right. But they have to be better than what other conventional root beer float. Otherwise, you go down, there must be, do you have like a store here? No, there is a store that sells ice cream and soda and stuff like that. But you know, you got to put it all together and make it special. And you got to smile, right? Because otherwise, people, the delivery becomes very important. Okay, but let's get back to basics here. Colostrum is not the only source of milk. You can go to Hy-Vee and buy a quart of pasteurized milk. So the first thing we had to ask when we're doing functional, we have to ask is what's the difference between pasteurized milk and milk from colostrum? Because if they're all the same, that wouldn't help us very much. We just drink milk, right? And we would cure Alzheimer's disease by just drinking milk, right? Isn't that true? That doesn't happen. People are drinking milk and they still have Alzheimer's disease. So that's probably wrong. But we had to prove it scientifically. So we had to isolate all this RNA from the colostrum and then do very fancy molecular studies to say what are the genetic similarities and the genetic differences between colostrum and pasteurized milk. And there were differences, 88, 63 genes, 113 that were up, some sense, but there's, you know, not that many genes that were up or down regulated, but they were present. So what do we do next? What do we do next? So we got the milk, we went to high V, we did all the same experiments, and we saw that they were similar in terms of the numbers of proteins. What would we do next? Okay, so this is where it got very interesting, is the difference between pasteurized milk and colostrum. People thought we were really crazy. We're doing it in the laboratory, and we're working on milk to try to treat Alzheimer's disease. But this is the activation of phagocytes is the early immunological response that governs neurodegeneration that we see in Alzheimer's disease. So what you're going to see is that the scores, when we look at the Z-score, which is the most significant compared to the milk and the activation, what are you seeing here? What does this data mean? What the data means is that it was exactly the opposite of what we expected, the exact opposite. We were expected that the colostrum would have less of an activation, right? Less of this red cells that were going on. And the pasteurized milk would have an increase, right? That was the opposite. And we didn't see that. We saw the exact opposite. So the question is, what's going on? And why would colostrum be more activation or more activated of these inflammatory cells, and the milk that we got from high V would be less? How do we make sense of that? What do you think is going on? Think we're not interested in this work? We're going to stop this research? What do you think is going on?
I think you're going to continue with it.
But how do you make sense out of this?
Pasteurization, kill it.
Kills the stuff.
Kills it? How many people think death is the way to go? I don't know.
The colostrum being an early product, for a short time period, that being specialized milk, it's produced to keep babies healthy. That's where that's there. So you're getting normal milk that's longer in the production cycle, up to a year, versus that first, 6 hours, 12 hours?
Okay, that's a pretty good answer. It's all offense, I know you're taking pictures and everything, but it's not the correct one, but it's look, let me just tell you something. You're laughing, and I didn't ask him to give me the $20 back because I don't think he's related to you, right?
No.
Okay, so he's okay. He's okay.
Colostrum's involved with immune protection of a young animal, so
Right.
you'd expect a lot of pro-inflammatory stuff to be
Right,
there.
right. So what do you think? What do you think's going on here?
Well, I think it's just transferring a lot of active inflammatory promoting substances.
Right. So I think that's really close. But really what's going on in this cascade is that not everything that's pro-inflammatory is bad. So many of the products that we were seeing were, yes, they were pro-inflammatory and activation products, but they were regenerative pro-inflammatory products. So these products that we were seeing didn't have a uniform goal or a uniform end, but these inflammatory products were involved in regeneration and support. So it's not simply what you think of inflammation as being bad. Many of these inflammatory products were actually good products that were helping cells function better. And we can go over it there. They were just not chemokines, redox proteins. I mean, they were related to regenerative and homeostatic environment of the cells, even though they were activation or activating products. So that's the bottom line here. It wasn't just bad and good. It's defining what the pro-inflammatory or the inflammatory products were. So there's more to the story than that. And when we saw this, we didn't know what to think. We didn't know what to think because we were still trying to figure out what was going on in this early event. But I think this particular piece really helped us in the overall inflammatory response. So when we look at the difference between activation and inflammation, how are we doing? You okay? That's your girlfriend? What?
It's cooler out here, so we're staying out here.
Well, I don't want any hot things going on. I'm sorry. Did I say something bad? No.
Thanks for keeping him in line. Yeah.
Listen, I'm gonna get that $20 back one way or another. Have to make it sound. So what I'm trying to say, I think what we get it, is that there's a difference between, right, activation and inflammation. And what you're actually seeing here is that if you compare the end result of inflammation, which is actually the destructive part of the mechanism, the inflammatory response of that activation was markedly reduced by the colostrum. So yeah, you're getting a lot of activation products, but only a portion of those activation products were really pro-inflammatory. And the overall response was actually anti-inflammatory. And we had to do that separation between activation and inflammation. But this is where it got, and I'm not going to go through all the products and what was gone and yes with the milk, but I wanted to kind of go into the work we did in terms of defining pathways, which is the neuronal death, which is the part and parcel of, right, of what we're studying in neurodegenerative disease, in this case Alzheimer's disease. So what you're basically seeing is that this neuronal score, which we what the cell death of the brain cells, which is relatively minus, a minus score compared with, that means the lower the score, the better the outcome, okay? Positive score means there's more neuronal death. Negative score means there's less nerve cell death, right? You got me? What I'm trying to say? So in the end, whatever the colostrum was produced, these exosomes that are coming from colostrum, what we were able to demonstrate is that they are enabling protection of nerve cells. So the inflammatory response is diminished, the protection is increased, and the activation response is also increased in terms of the cascade. So what do we want to do? Where is our next big move with these colostrum? Well, we want to be able to use it as a conduit for treatment. So I think we're set to do this for Parkinson's disease, to start this, is that right? Yeah, so we're going to be moving this into a Parkinson's disease paradigm, if we can get a colostrum from you guys, I hope so. Why are we going with Parkinson's first? Really has to do with the model systems that we're developing and the immediate needs of scoring and developing. I think what we're dealing with Alzheimer's, it's going to be a lot more complicated, is kind of the bottom line. Who, what, when, where, and the strategy that we can use for Parkinson's is better defined, both at the model system and the translational availability of where we're going. So what do we hope to do with this milk project? Is to be able to be sure, first in the animal model systems, that they are neuroprotective. I think that's what's going to happen in the MPTP systems that we've set up and ready to go. And then the second part of this is to package the therapies into these exosomes that we isolated from colostrum. So we want to be able to enhance what we've already done in the cellular therapies using these constituents. But it's going to take us a while, and we realize that how we can use colostrum as a treatment for neurodegenerative disease ain't going to happen in one shot. It's going to take us a fair amount of work yet to clear and to get across the finish line. So we have a ways to go. I hope, I'm going to stop there because I know it's already close to 4 o'clock and you're probably ready to kill me. I'm telling you. And I was only kidding about the band issue. But I will say one thing about the band that's really important. I just want to say that we have played weddings. It's really true. And then there was a problem. There was a big problem. So I'm going to tell you this, and it hurts me to say this, but I'm going to end with this. I was killed for the band. The band decided that they were going to hire another accordion player. So I know it's terrible, but I missed the call. But here was the problem, the big problem. There was 4 women and me in the band. I think you heard that earlier part of the band when I played the accordion at one of the gathering, Amy. Is that true or not true?
I've heard you play the accordion. I'm not sure I've heard the story about the 3 women and
Yeah, maybe not. Just don't tell the chancellor, because he's mad at me. He's going to be president. I'll be in a lot more trouble than I am right now. But the story was that we were having an issue. We had the 3 women, a drummer, a bass player, and what do you call it, clarinet. Because we did polkas too, don't worry about that. So here was the issue. So what would you name a band? We have 3 women and me. What would be the reasonable name of this band? What would be? If you had to think of a name, what would you call the band?
Howie and the Gals.
Howie's the Gals? No, I want my mobile. What do you think the name would be? Okay, the name of the band, I thought, which the most reasonable would be Ladies and Gendelman. Ladies and Gendelman. What are you laughing? I thought that was it's a natural name, the Ladies and Gendelman. Why, you think that's dumb? I thought that was a really good name.
Great wordplay, yeah.
Yeah, good wordplay. No, it didn't work out. And the problem was the drummer was taller and bigger, like really big. And she almost beat me up. But that's she didn't like the name, so they fired me. But anyway, that was the end of I was a soloist, I think, after with the recording.
What was the name of the band?
It was Ladies and Gendelman, but it only lasted a one shot. We did. They won there.
Probably called the Dirty Old Man.
Well, you have to ask my wife about that one. I don't think we're going on.
So how did you change the Beer Barrel Polka to be politically correct?
Well, I think what happened is, luckily, I had a side gig, which is being a doctor and a scientist. Otherwise, I would not be able to support my family. But I think that's what went on. Anyway, just to be a little bit, it was really great being here. And thank you so much for your time. And it was great. Thanks.
Thank you.